Hey guys, it's Magna back here for some more ladder gameplay from Legacy of the Void Beta. This time I'm playing against a player named HS Hungary. For some reason I read that as SH Hungary the first time I saw it, but could have been a little bit different because there is a little bit of a glitch in Battle.net right now on Legacy of the Void. But this is going to be a TvT. I spent a lot of yesterday playing Terran on the ladder. And this guy actually turned out to be pretty good. Probably one of the better opponents I've faced that isn't like a legitimate pro tier level player. This is a pretty decent game that had a lot of interesting components I thought you guys would enjoy. But let's go ahead and talk build orders here. One thing I've noticed, especially from the Terran standpoint, is that you can just go depot, gas first, and still get your barracks at a normal time. So I thought that was pretty interesting if you wanted to ever open gas first and do some kind of weird shenanigans. Meanwhile, my opponent's going command center first, which is basically never heard of in TvT as far as in Wings of Liberty or Heart of the Swarm, just because you die so often to things like Reapers, gas first, Banshee type of builds. I'm not totally sure how builds start to clash in TvT in this expansion because it's really hard to tell by this point. You can see his barracks is considerably behind mine by about half the production cycle, so almost a minute, a little bit more than that maybe. But I guess just trying to figure out what's going on in here is what he's going to be doing, and so we'll kind of see how this game plays out. But I just thought there are a few interesting components to this game I thought we'd talk about just a little bit, trying to swap off the SCVs here. Not super used to all this happening too often, but since I normally would play Protoss 1v1 on ladder, I wouldn't get people harassing my building workers too much because that's not really a thing for Protoss. So just kind of a little bit of worker micro here just to keep the ones alive. Make him continue to waste mining time while trying to mitigate it as much as possible with mine. This SCV just stabs him in the face and gets the kill, so he's pretty hardcore. But even with gas first, you can get a reasonably timed factory and open with a pretty fast command center as well. So the CCs, if you look at the timer, both started fairly early, before 2 minutes in the game timer, which is pretty fast. On the other side, this is a pretty rare thing for Terran as well, is my opponent is going for 2 out of 3 miners on each gas for a little while. You really only see that from Protoss. You don't see that from other races too often, but these types of builds I think are going to become, or not builds, but I guess mining setups are going to be a little bit more common in Legacy of the Void considering the economy is so much different. So kind of cool to see stuff like this coming down. But yeah, I'm just go ahead and grabbing my second gas here. My plan was actually to open Cyclone against Terran to see if that's actually a thing. And what I plan to do normally on my stream is whenever I play a race, I will ask people for what kind of strategies they want to see, and they told me to run mass Cyclone in this game. So I'm just going to get out as many Cyclones as I possibly can. You can see it building here on the factory. Looks like they still haven't fixed a lot of the UI bugs that have been here, so I can't mouse over and see what's going on a lot of these units. Meanwhile, my opponent, going for a pretty fast starport, going to go ahead and grab their factory as well. And by the way, I really should note that even with this build order, there is a reason that nobody went command center first, and that's because he's on 1 Marine. I could have easily had 2 or 3 Reapers at his base, and it really would have just ended the game if I opened Reaper. So a lot of people, even though they are at reasonable levels, I talked to this guy afterward, and he was Masters on the European server. Even though there's a lot of higher level players here, they're still running builds that are not optimal whatsoever. So this, if I opened Reaper, it would have seriously, literally just ended the game. That's how far ahead I would have been, if not outright, literally killing every SCV that he has. So even though there's pretty high level players, most of the beta right now is still just messing around. So we're not going to know a lot about how the game works for quite a little while. A little bit of awkwardness here. Cyclone comes up here, tries to see what it gets done. You'll notice how late it is, by the way. This wasn't super optimized gas first to try to get a Cyclone on as soon as humanly possible. But even still, the fact that a command center first can have a tank out ready to go on the defense shows that the Cyclone build time is actually pretty long. So most of what I wanted to show in this game was that even though people are whining a lot about Cyclones being super strong and overpowered or whatever, they're actually not as strong as people think that they are. They only seem strong on the surface because you can make the comparison that people like to, in the sense that, oh, it's like a Phoenix where it can target whatever it wants and run around and deal a whole bunch of crazy damage. And it's like, yeah, but at the same time, they're 150 gas, they take a long time to build, they don't scale super well in a lot of these armies, and still, if you have like 1 siege tank, it will outperform it anyway. My opponent, meanwhile, is going to be going for these cute little siege tank drops So you can see one heading into either side right now. I'm just keeping my Cyclones back at home to try and intercept stuff like this, so I've got one at each side. And I only estimated this because my Cyclone did see the starport finishing, a tank up there with the tech lab attached to the factory still, so this kind of stuff seemed to make sense. So just to protect against that, I decided to just sit a couple of Cyclones on either side of the base. And you can see these things are actually really good for base defense, especially for stuff like this, where you can just kind of set them aside, and they will tend to lock onto the medevac and deal a lot of damage. So he goes ahead and drops it off here. Medevac takes a couple of shots from the turret, still dies. This one goes ahead and snaps the medevac's neck before it can even drop off. So really, he sent out a lot here and didn't get a lot done. But the unfortunate thing is that these aren't super great at breaking these tank sieges, but you still can walk right up into their face and get them in siege mode and kind of hurt them quite a bit. So Cyclone's doing pretty well at base defense so far. But as far as offensive capability, I don't really see a lot of these quite yet used super well for offensive capability, in terms of maybe the only exception being against Protoss. So kind of some interesting interactions here so far throughout the early stages of this game. By the way, both of us are playing a mech style, so he's going for a lot of factories here. You can see him starting to add on his armory so he can start getting into more specialized units. Getting cloak for his Banshees, which I think is going to be super common in these veins of mech, is to just carry around cloak Banshees with you every once in a while. And since people wanted me to just test out how well Cyclones do in mass, I am getting as many Cyclones as possible. You will note that he's only ahead by a couple workers here, so the economy is pretty much even. It's not like one of us was super behind by taking too much damage or by having a disadvantageous build or something like that. So just some interesting things to note. You'll notice that the Hellions do get killed pretty fast if they try to just take on a Cyclone by themselves, but the Hellions are like dirt cheap. I'm just trying to fill out the rest of my army with as many Hellions as possible, considering the Cyclones are 150 gas each. You do have to find a way to spend your minerals still, but I still just don't see the Cyclone really being that much of a thing, and we'll talk about more about that a little later, maybe in some other replays and stuff. But I guess the whole point of this was that it's not like the Cyclones are so strong that you can just run around with these whenever you want. They're going to be good, kind of low number map control type of units. 6 is a decent amount. I wouldn't say making any more than that's probably really going to be worth it too often. They're very good at base defense for single harassment, things like this too, so they have a lot more utility than people think. But Banshee coming in here, going to go ahead and grab a couple of kills. I'm actually waiting on a scan right now, and as soon as I can get a scan on this, then it will actually deal a lot of damage. These Cyclones really kill these Banshees fast, which you'll see here in just a second. So you can see normally this thing would have gotten away. It actually did fly back into range, vision range of this turret, which is why those last few Cyclone shots were able to get a hit off. So we're going to see an engagement here in just a little bit once he decides to get brave and move out. And both of us really can't do a lot of damage to each other, since I have really nice base defense with these Cyclones, and since he has pretty decent base defense with his siege tanks. There's not a whole lot either one of us can do to deal a ton of damage to each other right now. So I almost wonder if a strategy like supplementing more Banshees in instead of a lot of Cyclones would have been a decent idea. He's also considering that possibility by making Thors here, so considering mech is going to be much more of a mainstay in this matchup, and I guess overall in Legacy of the Void, it'll be interesting to see how mech versus mech really starts to shape up. And you're going to see a lot more of that, at least in this expansion, than you have in previous ones. I have to say the only mech versus mech games that I found in Heart of the Swarm were super rare, and they're really weird because nobody really plays it that often. Even the people that specialize in mech are like, against other mech, I don't really know what to do because I don't see it very often. But here comes one of the main engagements here, and you can see his army is so much more beefy, even though our army's costs are relatively equal. I'm just trying to actually catch him while he was on siege, because I knew if his army was sieged up, there's really no way I'd be able to get in there and do a whole lot. But the problem with these Cyclones is they are pretty fragile, only 200 hit points. The Thors themselves have 400, so he's able to tank a lot of damage with these things. And a big problem with this is that if you target a pretty low priority unit, you can, by the way, just overall commentary, you can see I just got absolutely slaughtered in that battle pretty badly, and he wasn't even sieged up. Our Hellions are pretty much equal. He doesn't even have Blue Flame done yet, so it just ought to show you that even though the Cyclones seem good on the surface, they're actually not that great. And especially in mass, because their range is so short, they're very stubborn units. They're more so for winning like one-on-one type of battles, So if it was like one tank versus one Cyclone, you can see that easily favors a Cyclone, but when the numbers start to get a lot wider than that, the tanks and Thors and stuff will kill these Cyclones very, very easily for cost. Keep in mind, these Thors are 150 minerals extra and 50 gas extra, so it's not like they're overly more expensive, but these Thors trade better basically in every single scenario. I did want to look at the upgrades, by the way. He's at 0-0. I'm pretty sure that I'm on 1 plus 1, right? No, I'm on 0-0 as well. So it's not like one player really has a big upgrade advantage either. And by the way, you can say, yay, I held that with the units that I have, but the supplies, he's basically double me, and I realize this. The next push will basically kill me very, very easily. So he'll be coming across the map here pretty soon, but I guess the whole theme of this replay is really to show that the Cyclones are interesting, and they're not the warhounds that people are used to from the Heart of the Swarm beta, where you just make them and they kill everything. These things are still good, but they're also really expensive. They're really stubborn, they take a long time to build, and they just don't scale well. So I hope that we can kind of start to put to rest those notions that Cyclones are too strong. The only problematic place I'd say that they're too strong in is probably against Protoss, because they will trade favorably almost every single time. But, I mean, the Widowmine's been in that same situation for pretty much the whole time anyway, so I don't see too much of a difference. So you can see him coming up here. He's just going to go ahead and slaughter me. I knew this game was over for quite a while, but I kind of wanted to play around with the unit a little bit more to get a little bit more experience with how it handles. But yeah, there's no way I'm going to break this. I'm just trying some silly things here, trying to get the hands on top of the tanks and see how I can trade. But yeah, that just pretty much annihilates me. And there's GG. So I thought this was a pretty interesting game for you guys to check out, especially for noting that mass Cyclone stuff is really not that good. A mixed mech army should destroy it pretty much every time, especially if you can get the tank siege. There's really no way the Cyclones should be able to get in there and do a lot of damage. But pretty interesting game nonetheless. I'll be right back with another video just following this one immediately, so check that one out, which should be another Terran game for those of you guys that are wanting Terran content. So check that out in just a little bit. I'll be right back with that, but otherwise, thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.